Hello, everyone. My name is Sahil.
My name is Peter.
And I'm Crystal.
And for our Map the System project, we focused on the affordable rental housing crisis in Toronto. In this presentation, we'll provide an overview of the challenge, including the main problems we discovered. We'll then present our key finding. And finally, we'll share the lessons we learned while applying a systems thinking approach to this issue. A housing crisis occurs when there is an extended, increasing scarcity of affordable housing. Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation states that housing is considered affordable if it costs 30% or less of before tax household income. This poses a real problem as almost 50% of households spend more than 30% of their income on rent. Couple that with increasing population and prices, and you get a housing crisis. And this is not just occurring in Toronto. It's a phenomenon we're seeing around the world in major metropolitan areas, such as Vancouver, London, and Seoul.
There are also two main problems we wanted to highlight. The first one being a conflict of perspectives. Some believe that housing is a human right, while others view it as a commodity. And the latter point then brings us about to a second problem, and that is financialization. To clarify, our society views housing as a commodity that stores value, and it should be traded depending on the market. These views gradually allow the financial sector to dominate and transform housing, especially in fast-growing cities. Our team came up with these 5 systemas, which address different areas that contribute to the housing issue in Toronto and globally. There are a number of vicious cycles that increase housing prices and fuel our cultural perceptions of housing. These maps also help us visualize that many proposed solutions do not address the main issue of financialization.
The key finding in our research is that the current housing crisis in Toronto and globally is rooted in the cultural shift in the way we treat housing. There's always been an internal tension between housing's use value as shelter and home versus exchange value as a commodity. The difference is that now the dominance of the exchange value perspective has been externalized in the global economy in both public and private sectors and in our societal values. Housing is no longer bought solely for its suitability as a home, but rather its potential as an investment. There is the core conflict of ideologies of housing as a human right versus housing as a commodity is reflected in the discourse around the housing crisis. This finding is particularly significant because it explains why many housing strategies have been ineffective. If the goals of a housing strategy is to provide affordable housing for everyone, eliminate homelessness, and uphold people's right to adequate housing, any policies or programs that depend on market-based strategies such as reducing regulations to incentivize developers and investors would never be able to achieve that. These are two incompatible ideologies because the end goal of investing in housing is to make money. Thus, financially centered practices are not conducive to a human rights-centered outcome.
We'll now go over the lessons we've learned along the way. For me personally, I work as a policy advisor, so I'm used to thinking in a problem and solution kind of way. But participating in Map the System helped me challenge that form of thinking and pay attention to the larger picture as a whole. Working on this project also opened my eyes to how difficult the housing issue is and how deeply it runs in our society.
And for me, I long wanted to dive deeper into utilizing a systems approach because it's particularly relevant for those who study geography and environmental studies, which I do. And I was so excited by this opportunity because it allowed us to practically develop our skills and practice this approach. And to be able to do that for an issue that I've long been passionate about is such a good opportunity. The systems mapping approach definitely led to certain assumptions that we had about why we face the housing crisis and the severity of its impact to be challenged quite substantially. By being able to examine deeper context and stakeholder relationships, we were able to see the causal loops that were perpetuating the issue and how many existing housing strategies were actually a part of it.
Finally, I assume that developers and the financial sector were to blame, but I did not know that they were essentially handed responsibilities for affordable housing development from our governments. My view of housing has also changed somewhat, where I understand the two cultural perspectives we've identified, but now I do view housing as more of a human right. Finally, I also have a background in geography, So it was interesting to work with a quote-unquote mapping approach that did not actually rely on geography. Using a systems thinking approach, we developed a greater understanding of why an affordable rental housing crisis exists in Toronto and globally. We hope that our research will act as a useful resource for housing advocacy in ensuring that a truly human rights-based strategy is implemented. Thank you for allowing us to present.